Stephen, it's super great that you welcomed us into your awesome venue, the historic Tower Theater. Vince and I are super excited to sit down and have a conversation with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about your venue and what has brought you to today with the Tower Theater.
Okay, strap in. So yeah, this is as you said, a historic Tower Theater. It was opened in 1937 as a movie house. At that time, there was a big boom of these places across the country, right? The nightlife spot. People went out to see movies, and that was pretty early on. We had a number of them here in Oklahoma City. We lost them over the decades to various sorts of, developments and things like that. And it sat dormant for a long time. And for me, I grew up in Moore, came into Oklahoma City a lot. And it was, as I kind of grew up and got into various parts of the music industry and stuff, I would drive by and see that marquee and always kind of wondered to myself what was going on in there, what was that space, what's behind those doors. And then in 2016, it was purchased by Pivot Project, which is a local development group. Their sort of specialty was historic rehabilitations, and so they had this vision of the tower sort of being their like crown jewel of their portfolio, I feel like. At least that's my interpretation of it. Because they put a lot of thought and effort into the rehab, and it's a beautiful rehab. They restored the scalloped plaster ceilings. They refurbed all these chairs in the balcony and just try to really keep the character of Tower, and then had this vision that it was going to be a concert venue and event space. Interestingly enough, I toured this space right after they acquired it in my capacity at the Academy of Contemporary Music at UCO, which is where I was working at the time. So I got a chance to come in and see it right after they bought it, and it was just...
Still kind of
It was
wrecked.
a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a hole here in the ceiling. The basement down here was flooded. And long story short, as I kind of started these conversations with the Pivot guys of like, I don't know how I can help, but maybe I can help in some way. Like, this is what I do. I've got experience with venues. I've got experience with the music industry. I know people. I know techs. I know musicians. Like, maybe I can help get this thing off the ground. I was finding a time with ACM where I was like, kind of getting over it a little bit. Higher education is public and it's super great. And I love the mission because it is the school I needed for myself at that time. Had that school existed, my band at the time would have existed and continued to exist, and they wouldn't have gone to California and Boston and ultimately the UK. And I've watched so many great talents and bands dissolve and export into other areas because there wasn't something here for them. And so how I came to this is kind of a weird journey. I ended up leasing office space up here because I had met one of the guys. He was like trying to understand what I was doing and shooting video, and he was like, you just need to lease office space and put a studio in up here and just be a part of what's about to happen. And I was like, that's a crazy idea. That's stupid. Of course I'm gonna do that. Like, of course I'm gonna figure out how to make that work. I hadn't thought about this. Long story short is we sat down March 2017 and came to terms on us forming the operating company to sort of take over.
Pivot Project is interestingly a group of guys that care a lot about community and community spaces. And I think they built this theater to be a space for the community that happened to do things like concerts and movies and whatever.
It's interesting that you say that. I'm going to rewind you a little bit too. That moment you say they had envisioned this as a community space, we put together a literal book. It was like 35 pages. And it was essentially a business plan, but like we never really made a business plan before. So it was more like, here's a page of ideas. Like, what if we did these kind of events? Or what if we did these kind of concerts? And as we went through it, the thing that was really at the front of it was being a part of the community and being very kind to people and really focusing on the experience. And we put that in front of Pivot, and they kind of flipped through it at this meeting, and they were like, you pulled this out of our heads. Like, this is the book of what we wanted Tower to be. And so that was sort of that moment of like, okay, this is the right
There's a
thing.
click here, yeah.
It seems counterintuitive maybe sometimes to think about a privately owned for-profit business, which is what we are, that is like trying to give itself away to the community. And we've done that a ton. We've given this room away probably as much as we've rented this room out. Because at the end of the day, like with 1,000 capacity room at the level we're operating at, our core audience isn't really that far away from us. Like we do draw from Texas and from St. Louis and all, we draw from the region and whatever, as much as I've driven down to the Granada and Dallas multiple times in my life, or I've driven up Tulsa to Canes or whatever. Like, you have that moment, but really it's about these neighborhoods, it's about the city, it's about, even the county. I mean, we literally have had funerals, rallies, political debates, church service happens here every Sunday. Like it's everything in this room. And Republican debates, Democratic debates, independent, whatever. Like there's never been a filter on it from there outside of like, you're not coming in here to like express some hate or something that we don't, if you want to come have a conversation, maybe it's a heated conversation, that's fine, because those conversations have to happen. The community needs those spaces.
Yeah.
So that was something that we all identified with. While concerts were like a thing we all wanted, it was really about those opportunities to like be a space for people to gather.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I thought was really interesting in some of the earlier conversations is that you're like, hey, we're a fully owned and operated business. You own all of your gear, the venue, all of that kind of stuff. And that seems to be something that is maybe rare in this industry. So tell us about that and why that's so meaningful for you guys.
A lot of venues will hire out staff. They'll hire out sound techs or whatever. They'll even hire out the sound systems that come in. Usually you see that in larger places, right? But since concerts were key to what we were doing, my sort of like audio engineer, audiophile, music tech brain was like, I want to make sure that this room is really outfit to showcase the music and make that experience, because that's what people are paying for. They're paying for an experience. So by having our own sound system and not renting it, it is installed, it stays here, it stays maintained, it stays tuned, all those things. Our staff, our techs, so it's the same people running those shows every time, so they know the room, they know the system, they know all those things. It results in a really great experience sonically. Same thing goes with the lighting, visually. Same thing even goes with just the front door staff, like the bar staff. Like it's almost that thing where like you might go to your favorite bar and know Colby's behind the bar or whatever. It's the same thing here. Like it's the same staff over and over again. So as people become regulars of the establishment, one of the things we've gotten a lot of praise for is they come and they know they can come to Tower and have a great experience. They know it's going to sound good. They know it's going to look good. They know their drinks are going to be good. They understand the pricing. They know what it's like to come in the front door. And then that just removes all those questions and concerns that somebody might have about, do I want to go see that show there or should I go see it somewhere else? We had to, coming into a market that didn't exist, with a venue that didn't exist, we had to start sort of making that name for ourselves, a place that's going to be great. And that also works the same for the bands that come through. Like they come through and they're dealing with the same front of house person. They're dealing with the same, production manager. And it just creates that consistency and that understanding. And because we've established ourselves as quality and great experience, the fact that we've sort of reversed that flow on exporting our talent, like we're now drawing them back to here and we're the source of that. That's a huge sense of pride for me that everything we've done along this way has been in the right way and the right decision. The bands want to come back here. We heard pretty quickly as bands would come through here. One of our early struggles with the industry is we're a venue they didn't know, we were a promoter they didn't know, in a city they didn't really have on their radar in most cases. And so, they hear from their agent, oh, you're going to play this historic theater in Oklahoma City. And they're like, we've never been there. Historic theater, they have in their mind those original pictures with the hole in the ceiling and the nasty stage and all that other stuff. And they walk in here and are like, oh, this is not what was in my mind. Really, all of that was about controlling the experience, because you can't do that if you're subbing all this stuff out and it's changing all the time. And it's just too many added variables. We also knew we needed to operate like to the business side of it. It mattered too, because while it was an expense and there's debt and all this other stuff, we were going to operate at a pace that was so constant that there was just no time for that. And the idea of renting out and bringing in and flying out and moving in, it's too many variables. You eliminate those entirely by keeping it here, by keeping it consistent and keeping the people here.
That's good.
So one of the things that, as a consumer of wanting to go to events here and there, I've noticed from the old days is you had to go to the big theaters, the big venues run by the big names in order to have an easy, good, positive, maybe technology-driven experience. That's clearly not the world anymore, because the little guys can drive just as much technology to support that experience as the big guys. I can say as a consumer of Tower Theater's services here and the events that have happened, you've clearly found a path through using technology to create a good experience for the community that you intend to be built to serve, right? Tell us more about how you've thought about technology, you use technology, maybe in some spaces where that technology has driven better outcomes for your business, that could maybe help us understand more about that, and other people who might watch this think about how they could use technology in the same.
We've talked a little bit about experience, and that was sort of the underlying piece of it is technology from like the customer facing side of ticketing platforms, websites, social media, marketing, all that sort of stuff, which is pretty obvious, but that's part of it, right? Like if you're spending 50, 60 bucks on a ticket to come see your favorite artist, like there's a lot of logistics in that. And so like the idea of like you get a ticket that's on your phone or it gets emailed you to PDF, or God forbid you lose those things or don't have them, that we can just simply look it up at the door by your name or whatever, like making that entry point easy, because in some cases shows go on sale months in advance. And so like keeping track of that, or digging through your email, like, so as much as that sort of technology is important in those moments, there's another equal part of that, which is the sort of like personal experience and the human experience at the door. Because I have a great story of this just the other day, because something we are dealing with and that we're kind of waiting for the next innovation in technology right now with ticketing specifically. But we just recently had a couple come to the door, two couples. They were coming together, an older couple, to see a show, and they had bought tickets on what they claimed was the band's website. They went to the band's website and bought some tickets through there for like a VIP experience or something. There was a little bit of a problem in what the band was selling versus what we were doing, ultimately being that they were selling it as a seated reserved show when it was a standing show. So when these people showed up at the door with these tickets they paid a premium for, ready to see this band they were excited for, we had no record of them. But it was like, we looked at the situation, it was like, this doesn't seem like a scam on your front. This seems like maybe you guys got scammed. And ultimately it wasn't, it was just total breakdown. We'll deal with this with the band later. Let's get you guys in the building. So then we got them in the building, but then they come in and they go, well, there are no chairs.
With our seats, yeah.
Yeah, and we're like,
yeah,
and we were like, well, we can't put chairs on the floor, whatever. So we ended up seating in the balcony, and a couple days later, I get a handwritten letter in the mail of them just gushing about how awesome the experience was, about how they feel like they realized they were on the verge of catastrophe and disappointment, and we managed to swing it the other way. And it was in that letter, they actually say, I wish there was a better way for people like us who aren't as technologically savvy to get more information and better stuff. So it's an interesting thing. And so we focus on those pieces because that's important, and we're always working to try to make the customer experience better. But then the other side of the technology is there's some technology we rely on this building every single day that if it did not exist, we would be toast. I don't know how we would do it.
That's good.
One day we'll stop talking about this, but this little thing called the coronavirus happened and shut down community spaces. Right when you guys were really starting to kind of get your mojo, walk us through a little more about like your journey as the guy in charge who said, I can do this, and took this big risk of a lot of things you didn't know how to do. And then this super unexpected thing gets dropped in your lap, and you've got, the bankroll, and you've got the business and the bands, and you're trying to find your way through that.
To your second part of like the journey through the unexpected, like I think that's really a big thing for anybody who's even thinking about identifying with that word entrepreneur. Is every single part of it is unexpected. Like I think some of the best entrepreneurial journeys are the ones that start from that like accidental realization that you've stumbled across something. I mentioned this before, that coach I had at the time who was asking me what it was like to be here. Another thing that she would often say is, and I don't think this is necessarily hers, but something she would repeat, is leap and the net will appear. And like, that is, at first I didn't understand that. Years later, now I totally understand. That's the core thing. Like, entrepreneurship is about you stepping out to do something, and you're probably gonna fall, and you're gonna have that moment of like falling and that rush if you've ever bungee jumped or anything like that, like the feeling of falling. But then at some point, that net's gonna appear, and maybe the net is shutting it all down and giving up and going back. But something's gonna happen. Like, it's not gonna necessarily kill you to take that journey. And then the lesson I would say is that don't expect that first step and that first leap to be the only one. It's gonna happen again and again and again.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and honestly your wisdom, the experiences you've had here over the last few years. And honestly, as a local member of the community, thank you for continuing to live out the purpose and the mission, the vision of this particular space, and doing so with such creativity and to make a difference in the lives of the people around us. We really appreciate that and all the wisdom you shared.
Yeah, Stephen, good to spend time with you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you so much.